Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at Draw and Quarterly's release of Tadao Suge's Trash Market. This is a book that's been out for a while, and I haven't got it, but I'm more familiar with Yoshihiro Suge, Tadao's brother. I know Tadao was the person who was getting translated first, but Sean brought the Yoshihiro Suge stuff to my attention, and so that's what I knew first. I then read, because this is also translated by Ryan Holmberg, who's doing the Yoshihiro Suge stuff and is doing a lot of stuff with Sean now, and just has real impeccable taste in manga, translating important stuff like this, stuff from Garo, and just really important, I think, the books that Ryan chooses to translate. So I had got the Boat Life release, which is a new release translated by Ryan, that is a Tadao Suge book, and really, really like that, even more than the Yoshihiro Suge stuff. So I wanted to go back and get the old Tadao Suge stuff and continue to be impressed and continue to actually, as much as I like the Yoshihiro Suge stuff, I think the art's a little better in that by a little, not a lot. But I really like Tadao Suge's approach to writing. It's a little bit more down to earth and less surreal. It also seems less mean spirited, at least the stuff I've read, than some of the Yoshihiro Suge books that I've read, especially the new compilation of his work, the Nejishiki, I believe it's called. So, anyways, really enjoying this stuff, and just want to go through and give like a little peek into each story in the book and what it's about, just like one page from each. It's a collection of short stories. This first one is about a character who is just really into Van Gogh. The story is called Up on the Hilltop of Vincent Van Gogh. So it's a really interesting way to both tell a story about a character and their relationship to an artist, how that's impacting their life, but then also give a lot of historical facts about Van Gogh himself. So you can tell that at some point Suge must have got interested in Van Gogh and his artwork and done research on it, and then found a really good way to put that into a story. Anytime someone's like able to run two tracks at once like that and tell me a lot of interesting facts that I didn't know, while also tell me a good story, I think that's really effective, and that's a great piece for that. The second piece in the book is called Song of Showa. This is about these characters, Katsuo, Mom, and Tomio. They're basically living in the Showa era, and there is the next story is even more down to earth. This is called Song of Showa. You basically have the three main characters, Katsuo, his mom, and then a third character, Tomio. They're poor. They're in the Showa period. This is called Song of Showa. So having read some of Shigeru Mizuki's Showa books by now, I have a little bit better historical context. But these are people who are living in poverty. There's a character in the book that is basically a dangerous character, and they're trying to keep the kids around so that the abusive guy can't come in and do things. Just really good down to earth storytelling that shows like kind of the struggles people were going with. And I think that's with the Tadao Suge stuff, the stuff that I think lands for me a little bit better than the Yoshihiro Suge stuff, is it feels more real life and actually character driven. I really enjoyed this right here too, where the characters are reading manga within the manga and saying, see, I told you Tezuka's the best at this kind of thing. It's so cool. So you get the sense that some of these are probably loosely autobiographical as well, but they're never presented that way, so you can just read like a story straight through, and that makes it much more approachable to me. I think there's also a lot of thematics here that feel a bit like what you'd get in Barefoot Gen. You know, once you get past the nuclear part of those books, the bombs dropping is just dealing with the repercussions of the war on Japan. This is called Manhunt, and it's about a character named Mr. Taguichi. Mr. Taguichi is someone who basically just like disappeared, and they've found him now. These people who have been searching for him found him, and they're the whole story is like an interview of like, why did you take off? Why did you leave? What happened? And he can't really tell them. He's just kind of telling them, I don't know. Like one day I just felt like I needed to see a train, and then I went and looked at the trains and I took off. You get some really lovely compositions in here, especially like this one, I think, where everything gets flattened down and abstracted is really beautiful without having all of the detail that you would see in some of the Yoshihiro Suge books, or like the Shigeru Mizuki books. And I think the graphicness of this works really, really well. You don't always need to have all that intense texturing and stuff to land a powerful image, so that's cool. I think this is one of my favorite stories in the book just because of the odd like character work that's being developed in there. It was very interesting to me. This story, Gently Goes the Night, is a pretty intense one and a pretty uncomfortable one. You have a character who's been a really well-behaved person his whole life, but has found out he's got cancer and is kind of delving into the worst aspects of his personality. Not my favorite story in here. Like a lot of the stuff in the Nejishiki book, it's very rapey oriented. But this one, at least because it's like down to earth and tied to this story about what someone will do when they feel like they have nothing to lose, is much more interesting to me. Whereas some of the Yoshihiro Suge stuff in the Nejishiki was just, purely for the sake of being surreal and kind of angsty, it seemed like. So that's where Tadao, like, to me, continues to outshine his brother, is in the writing and the purpose for things. This story is a tale of absolute and utter nonsense. It's basically a story about a political revolt, and you can see all the characters here kind of storming the castle with the stormtroopers there. Again, a look at like post-war politics and things. Trash Market, this is the titular story in the book, and a really good one. I think this one also might connect somewhat to the Slum Wolf book. I'm going to have to go back because I read that one. I was going to review them together, but the Slum Wolf book really had this strange structure that I really liked to it, where the characters, it was like a bunch of self-contained stories that also kaleidoscope showed a larger picture, and a lot of the characters still showed up. I'm wondering if some of these characters show over, because now that I'm looking at it, it seems familiar to me. But this is basically about people who are so poor that they're selling their blood for food. There's this guy named Pops in here who's walking around with this cat. And again, just a look at the like kind of poverty that these artists probably grew up in, or at least around, aware of, that Suge is recording on the page. So really intense, I think, important stories throughout. There's also included in this and the Slum Wolf the Tadao Suge Review 94 through 97 in this book, which are a bunch of autobiographical articles that were released under this title, but they came with these illustrations. So I think that's a cool addition to the book as well. I tend not to read these type of things in comics just because I'm looking for the comics and I'm trying to make best use of my time. But at some point I would love to go back through and read this. And then also you have, as typical in a Ryan Holmberg translated book, you have Ryan doing his like rogue scholar work where he's writing these really well researched historical essays that contextualize the artists, their influences, and all of that. He's just working outside of academic journals, and I think is doing the exact right thing, is providing these in a format with the work itself rather than the cold, removed academic journal that's inaccessible to the general public. That's one of the things that I really love about what Ryan's doing. Again, I personally don't have the time right now to go through and read all of this stuff, but I think this is a very important work that's being done. And when I have had the time to read some of these, Ryan is an excellent historian and an excellent scholar, really knows his work, and also has fantastic taste in comics. So pretty much anything that's got Ryan's name attached to it is a translation that I'm going to be reading, and I would say that it's of historical importance, and anyone who really is interested in not just comics, like in terms of America, but like the history of the medium, how it's developed, how all these things interrelate, and are curious about the manga market, especially, like, you've got to be buying anything that Ryan translates. It's just like essential reading in terms of comics, and that it has this extra like historical project going on. And I think Ryan's building up a really great body of work there and exposing us to artists who have really great bodies of work, like Tadao Tsuge, who we should have been seeing their work years and years and years ago. But now, as the audience is older and there's an audience in place for this type of work, these things are being released. Thank goodness. It's also continues to impress upon me how much further the medium was able to be pushed, especially in terms of quality of writing, the types of stories that were being told, the sophistication with the medium to tell these type of stories. These are being released like in the late 60s, early 70s, and I'm trying to think of anything comparable in the American market. It's like, the EC stuff would have preceded this, but was still geared towards kids. And then just because of historical events, we just didn't get good stuff in America for like serious stuff for a long time. That got stifled, and it's really nice to see that Japan took some of that influence, I believe, from the EC work, and then had the freedom to continue exploring this more serious adult vein, not just the edgy underground stuff that came up in America, but I think some really, really sophisticated, well-told, adult, mature comics that don't need to be edgy to land. And I'm really appreciative that we're getting this peek into that time, this era where there's all this great stuff being made. And I would be totally unaware of it if these books weren't being translated. So really, really appreciate these projects. Like I said, and anything Ryan translates, I'm gonna get, because I know he's got great taste. So I'm sure a lot of you have already read this, but if you haven't, definitely go out and get yourself the Tadao Tsuge collection from Drawn and Quarterly. It's all great stuff.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.